Do you have an established flock of Coturnix quail? You're wondering why your eggs are getting smaller instead of bigger? That's what we're going to talk about in today's video. Hey guys, welcome back to another Slightly Rednecked video. Again, my name is Chris, and if you're not familiar with this channel, I help you to produce your own meat, eggs, and vegetables from your backyard, your balcony, your deck, your garage, or even a spare room in your house, if that's the way you want to do it. Today we're talking about egg size. This question actually came up on a live broadcast last week. I can't remember who asked it, or I'd give them credit for it. But at the time I was a little bit stumped. And what they asked was, why are my eggs getting smaller? I've got birds, they've been laying for a while. I think said they were, eight months old or something like that. And I mean, they're plenty old enough. They're not just new at layers, but wanted to know, as they're producing eggs, they're getting smaller and smaller eggs and not getting bigger eggs. So that's what I figured I'd go ahead and talk, because at the time I was stumped on that. I didn't really have a good answer for it. I didn't know, exactly what could cause that. I got to thinking about it, did a little bit of research, and I got a couple of things to talk about today. All right, so to give you an example, these are eggs that I collected today, and just show you a difference here. We've got some pretty significant size differences, and I don't know how well this is going to show up on camera, but I've got some pretty, here, maybe it's easier if I hold them one at a time. I've got a pretty large egg right here, and then a pretty small egg right next to it, and really the same thing with these other two eggs. A really tiny small egg and a much larger egg. So hopefully you can kind of see the size difference we're talking about right there. Now I know why I've got smaller eggs right here, because in this hutch right here I've got birds that are a little bit older, have been laying for a little while, and then I've got some birds that are a little bit younger and are just starting to lay. And whenever birds just start laying, they're going to produce some smaller eggs, some larger eggs, some eggs with no yolk in them, double yolk eggs, eggs with no shell on them. You get some weird things when they first start laying. It takes a little bit of time when birds first start laying for them to develop a good continuous egg cycle, I guess that is. It takes several days for that egg to move through the hen. It starts off getting, developed, and then it takes a day or two at least for that to move through, get the shell added, all that kind of stuff, and then for them to actually lay the egg. And when they first start, you're just going to get some irregular, weird egg kind of things going on. All right, so now with that being said, there's also other things that can cause that. So whenever birds start laying, or when they first start relaying, so if their egg cycle gets interrupted at some point, then you're going to run into the same kind of thing. Not necessarily will, but you could run into the same kind of thing with some little bitty tiny eggs, some great big eggs, some off, no shell on them, weird kind of stuff going on. So that happens when they first start laying, when they first come of age, or if their egg cycle gets interrupted and they start laying again. So let's talk about what can interrupt their egg laying cycle. There's two main things that interrupt quail when it comes to laying eggs. One is light. They have to have at least 14 hours a day of light in order to lay on a consistent basis. Now, it's wintertime here. Our days are short. I mean, the sun comes up at 7 in the morning and it goes down about 5:30 in the evening. So we're getting nowhere near that. I've got a solar light. I don't know that you can see it on the camera, but I got a solar light up here. Got a solar panel right here. That it's a dusk to dawn light, so it comes on automatically when the sun goes down, and it stays on until the battery runs out. And if we get good sunny day, it does a pretty good job. It'll stay on pretty much all night long. Be really, really dim when I get out here first thing in the morning. But it doesn't have to be a ton of light. If you've got enough light to read by, that's enough to extend the daylight and keep your birds laying. But it's been cloudy. It's been very overcast the last couple of days. This light has not been charging up well, and there's been several times where it hasn't come on at all. So it's been sporadic when I'm getting 14 hours a day. And as a result, my birds are a little bit sporadic with laying. They'll lay fairly consistently, and then I might not get many eggs for a couple of days, and then they'll start laying again and start laying as the light starts to increase, start laying a little bit more consistently then. But I'm getting some weird off-size eggs in that process because their egg cycle is getting interrupted, if that makes sense. The other thing that can interrupt their egg laying cycle is stress factors. One of the biggest stress factors is moving your birds around. If you move them from one cage to another, that's going to stress them out. They'll usually stop laying. Now what you'll get is a couple of days worth of eggs, and then they'll shut down, because again, it takes several days for that egg to move through the hen's cycle and to actually get laid. So what you're getting is the eggs that they developed before you moved them, before the stress factor hit, and then they'll shut down for a little while and then start back up. But when they start back up, you may get some weird off-size small eggs, that kind of thing going on again. If you have significant changes in food, that might affect it. I haven't noticed big changes from that. I use a fairly high protein feed. I use a 30% game bird starter on all my birds, but there have been times where I've had to switch over. And I do notice occasionally if I switch to a much lower percentage, like a 19-20% protein level, that can throw a little bit of an interruption in some of the birds in their egg laying cycle. Not necessarily all of them, but some of them do stop laying for maybe a day or two and then start again, and that's going to throw some off-size eggs in there. But that's a significant change in diet. Now, if you're feeding them 20% all the time, they're used to it, it's fine. You're feeding them 30% all the time, that's fine. I'm not saying that the protein percentage is going to cause egg sizes to shift or change. It's the drastic change, significant change in diet. If you have significant predator pressure, if you've got something coming up here and harassing your birds all the time, raccoons, dogs, cats, foxes, hawks, all these things have come after my birds before. If you've got that going on, now I would say it has to be fairly consistent. Like I had a situation where I had raccoons that had come up to the hutch, and I caught them on a trail cam. They were pestering the birds, but only did it one night. Didn't seem to affect the birds much at all. Now I had a fox that was coming by very consistently, night after night after night, grabbing the birds from the bottom and pulling their legs off through the bottom of the cage. That did affect the birds. That did stress them out because it was a consistent predator pressure. Also had a hawk that was on the hutch trying to get to the birds. He was hanging underneath, trying to get them from underneath. He stuck around for about 3 days, kind of affected the birds' egg laying a little bit, and then he ended up flying off, leaving them alone, figured he couldn't get to them, and everything was fine. But if you have a consistent a consistent predator pressure on your birds that's harassing them quite a bit, that can definitely interrupt their egg laying cycle, and you may start getting some weird eggs. You may not even notice much of an interruption, especially if not all of your birds are laying. So let's say you have 10 birds and you're getting about 6-7 eggs a day out of them. Well, it could be that some of the birds are laying some days, some of the birds are laying other days. It's not real consistent, so their egg laying cycle is inconsistent, is interrupted, and you may be getting some smaller eggs from them because they're just starting back up to start laying again. Or if they're not getting good consistent light, it's just a constant interruption in egg laying cycle, and that can result in the smaller eggs that you're getting from your birds. Hopefully that makes sense. Other stress factors for your birds, if they're molting, they'll generally stop laying completely, but you may get some inconsistent egg laying from them, and they'll most likely be off-sized, weird-shaped eggs, smaller eggs. Some of those kinds of things will play into that as well. If you keep your birds outside like I do, this time of year, it's very hard, unless you have electricity running out here and you've got light on a good timer, and even then, it's a little difficult to get real good, consistent egg laying out of your birds, even if you've got a light on them. That will help, and that will definitely improve your odds of getting good, consistent egg laying out of them. But with the days being so short as they are, it's not uncommon to get a little bit of inconsistent egg laying out of them with an interrupted egg laying cycle, and again, that just means you're going to get some weird off-sized eggs from time to time. Now, the other thing that can really impact your egg size would be if your quail have some kind of illness, disease, something like that that's going on. That can impact their egg laying cycle and can impact the egg size that you're getting out of them. That's probably unlikely. You would probably see other signs going along with that as opposed to just your egg size shrinking, but that is something that could impact them too. All right, so now with all that being said, what do you do about it? Really there's nothing to do about it. Now, what we're talking about here again is your egg size. You've got pretty good size eggs, and then all of a sudden you're starting to get small eggs. Not that they've always laid small eggs. If they've always laid small eggs, that's a different thing altogether. Chances are it's just a genetics issue. You've got birds that just are not genetically prone to laying larger eggs. You may have to look at replacing your breeding stock with some higher quality, bigger laying genes, and fix it that way. But if this is a sudden change in egg size, like you're getting big eggs and then all of a sudden you're getting smaller eggs, it's probably due to some kind of interruption in their egg laying cycle, whether that be light or stress. Severe weather changes can stress them out. I've never had too many issues with that. But when I'm talking about severe weather changes, when you go from, 70, 80 degrees during the day down into the 70s at night, and then all of a sudden you get a hard freeze and it stays cold for 3 or 4 days. That could be a drastic weather change, a severe storm coming through, something like that. That has never really made much of an impact on my birds, but it could. It could make an impact on your birds. It could stress them out. They may not completely stop laying, but it's still an interruption in their egg laying cycle, so therefore they're laying some smaller eggs, some weird sized eggs as they get back into the routine of laying on a regular basis. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. So in my experience, really, the size of the egg, other than a genetic issue, if you're starting to get small eggs, it's probably due to interruption in the egg laying cycle that causes that. So anyway, hopefully this information was helpful to you. You got the information you were looking for. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, God bless.